Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stella and I'm an intern with the ASEAN Foundation. It is my pleasure to be the MC for the third and final Connect ASEAN Creative Futures Dialogue today. Connect ASEAN is the ASEAN Foundation's core arts and cultural program, supported by the Republic of Korea. The Connect ASEAN Creative Futures Dialogue is organized as a response to the new reality of COVID-19 pandemic facing artists and creative. We believe that artists and arts professionals can play a key role in rebuilding the world post-pandemic. Now, while waiting for more people to log in, we will have a brief game. Please log on to www.menti.com and enter the code. Just give us a thumbs up or react on the front page so that we know you're logged in and we can begin the game. The code is 655567. The game will consist of about 4 questions about ASEAN and the Republic of Korea in general, and each question will have a time limit of 10 seconds, so the faster you answer, the more points you'll get. I can see you've got most of you already joining the game. I'll wait until at least 30 of us are in the game and then we will begin. Okay, I see 35 of us, 36, and I will begin the game now. So the first question, why are we together? 안녕하세요, kumusta, apa kabar? This is one set. Xin chào, sawati, and mingalaba. So for your first question, can you guess why those phrases were categorized, what those phrases were categorized according to? Was it A, tonal versus non-tonal languages, B, non-tonal versus tonal languages, or do the phrases mean how are you and hello, or the opposite? Time's up. Let's see if you got it correct. Wow, a lot of you guessed it was the C, how are you versus hello, but no, in fact, it's non-tonal versus tonal languages. So Korean and Indonesian are non-tonal languages, whereas Vietnamese, Thai are tonal languages, which means that they have different tones for same pronunciations. Next question. Most of us know the Korean blockbuster Train to Busan. And as part of a series of events to celebrate the 2019 summit, there was an ASEAN-Korea train event held during that time. So what do you think it was called? One of the stops was actually also Busan. Was it called Beautiful Busan? Or maybe something like Platform 3P? Wow. But in actual fact, the name was called Advancing Together, the ASEAN-Korea train Advancing Together. Now, take a quick look at this picture. I'll give you guys 3 seconds to look at it. It is a Korean traditional instrument. And your question is, what traditional ASEAN instrument looks similar? So do be careful. There's a trick answer or a trick question here. Is it the zither? Is it a kayagum? Or is it a danchang? Make your guess. 3 seconds left. 2, 1, and time's up. Wow, a lot of you guessed the second option, but no. The question asks for a traditional ASEAN instrument, and so the answer is actually the danchang, which is the cousin of the zither and the kayagum and the Japanese kendo. And now let's take a quick look at the scores. As we can see, it seems like Millie is way leaps and bounds ahead of the rest. And so congratulations, Millie, for being the fastest and the most accurate with your answers. And last but not least, let's see, how do you feel about the final Connect webinar? I see that everyone's feeling excited, productive. Maybe I'll give you guys a little bit more time to enter some of the things that you feel. And time's up. So that is the end of our Menti Games. Thank you for participating. Hope everyone had fun learning about the ASEAN and Republic of Korea arts and cultures. So before we officially start this webinar, And to ensure everyone has a good experience, there are some house rules that I would like to share with you. First, please rename yourselves in the Zoom application according to your name and affiliation. For example, Stella and ASEAN Foundation. Please write your questions in the questions and answers box. Click Q&A in the webinar controls to launch it. You can upload a question in the Q&A, but you cannot comment. As this webinar is chat-based, your microphones are automatically muted and your videos are turned off. For the certificate and panelists' PowerPoints, this will be announced at the very end of this webinar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin the third webinar of Connect ASEAN Creative Futures Dialogue. We will now start the main event, and I will now pass this to Mr. Benham, the Project Director of Connect ASEAN. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ben to the screen.
Thank you very much, Stella, and to all of those who are joining us from across the ASEAN region and beyond, a very special thank you for attending our final Connect ASEAN Creative Futures webinar for 2020. In previous sessions, we explored digital acceleration and social impact, key concerns for the arts sector, and the future of the creative economy in ASEAN nations and Korea. Our final topic will address environmental sustainability, a global challenge we highlighted when we devised the Connect ASEAN program 3 years ago. This timely topic comes off the back of Korean President Moon's new Southern Policy Plus, which includes health and climate change initiatives, as well as the Green New Deal for sustainable economic recovery post-COVID-19. Now, before we begin our presentations today, we are joined by a very, very special keynote speaker, Ruby Shang. Ruby is a trustee of the Asian Cultural Council and the Asia Foundation boards. Ruby is a trained dancer and served on the dance faculties of the Juilliard School and the New York University Tisch School of the Arts. In addition, she was the country director, Asia director, and advisor at the Clinton Foundation for 13 years. Her scope of work there covered major initiatives in healthcare and the environment. Please join me in welcoming to the screen Ruby Shang. Ruby.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Ben. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for including me today. And I'm so glad I didn't play that game because I would have been the slowest, I'm sure. Everybody is so fast. I'm so amazed. But thank you, really, really, truly thank you to Connect and the ASEAN Foundation for including me today. 2020 has been very different from everyone's expectations. And I know that you've all been thinking about your lives and how we're going to survive this. Everything has changed. My life has certainly changed. Some of it voluntarily and much of it involuntarily. But the COVID has affected everyone. But even before that, you know, Asia has been going through some major geopolitical shifts. And I think that there are large forces that are impacting you, which you have absolutely no control over. And so really the question is, how do we survive best? How do we survive this in the most creative and the most heartwarming way, rather than very sad and depressing? And we want to fight all of those negative feelings. So I think you're doing absolutely the right thing by connecting to everyone here. We need to be closer to people, even though we are restricted in travel, and so we feel very isolated. But I think that it's important to be even closer to your friends, your families, your networks, your tribes, and to yourself. You know, get to know yourself a little bit better. As isolated as we are, we need to be sending out threads of communication. We want to weave a large tapestry. Even in this time, You want to create a network, a tapestry of communication to your network and your friends. It's more important now than ever before, because this tapestry of relationships, ideas, and projects it's really going to inform your life for the next several years. And we don't exactly know when the COVID situation is going to improve or change, but hopefully next year, but certainly not now. So, you know, I've done many things in my life, but the one commonality is people. That may sound very simplistic, but actually, you know how complicated people are. So it's one of the most difficult things, I think, to deal with, is managing people. And so whatever you do, you'll be working with people, and the fruitful relationships will build amazing projects that will bring you joy for many years into the future. And I used to be a modern dancer and choreographer. And when I transitioned from that world to the private sector, I found, to my incredible surprise, that my skill set as a choreographer was surprisingly useful. So as a choreographer, I used to organize annual productions, dance productions. And so I had to gather dancers, musicians, choreographers, composers, designers, find a venue, and then raise money so that I could pay everyone and everything. And then I found that as I transitioned into the private sector, and when my husband and I went to Vietnam and started up many businesses, that lo and behold, those skill set was perfect for starting up businesses. So we have to find skilled talent, you know, people for the office. We have to train them. We have to design a business. We have to find an office. And so it was all about people and managing them. And so the difference was that once it was set up and designed, of course, the businesses continued to keep making money to pay the workers. And the dance productions were one-time events, and I had to start all over again every year. It was much more difficult, frankly. So creative people need to make money in order to work, whereas in the rest of the world, most people work to make money. So it's a fundamental difference in our mindset. The other lesson from that transition was a job description. I had never seen a job description before as a choreographer. And all of the people I used to work with, the creative people, they would roll up their sleeves and get the job done, whatever it was. You know, so the job description, whether it was designer or videographer or dancer, was a platform. It was a foundation, but it wasn't a restriction. In other words, sometimes the set designer has to help me with lights or costumes, or he had to tell the musician something, you know, so everybody rolled up their sleeve and got the stuff done. Whereas I found, on the other hand, that in business, people tended to stick to a job description. So I encourage you to go beyond the job description. Not that you want to steal somebody else's job, but that you have relationships and a creative way of dealing with the people in your office or in your organization, because every organization is made up of people. And so whatever you like to do, whether it's about sustainability, the climate change, or the arts, there's usually a great deal of discipline involved. And that's another very important thread that can weave your tapestry, and it's applicable to all fields. These are the things that have no borders or boundaries or restrictions. When I worked for the Clinton Foundation, I was so impressed with the work ethic and the discipline of the younger staff members. So they, as a result, they had a lot of freedom and also a great deal of responsibility in their 20s, because we were in such a hurry to get the HIV and AIDS medicines out to the Asian governments. And so I hired many, many, many young people, and it was always a great joy to work with them, because they also rolled up their sleeves and got the stuff done. And to me, this is the way to work. And whether it's development work, whether it's creative work or business, the skills required are completely transferable. There are absolutely no restrictions when it comes to people's skills and discipline. And so it's not so much what you do, but how you do it and with whom. So send out those threads of communication. Weave a very, very rich tapestry, because it may take you, it may, turn into a flying carpet and take you to unimaginable places that you hadn't even thought of before. So thank you for having me today. And I'm happy to answer questions later. But all the best to all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ruby. And I'm so glad that in your keynote speech that you have focused on people, because when we think about environmental sustainability, most of us think about things that are external from ourselves, but we have to be reminded, I think, that we as humans are part of the ecology and part of the environment. And I'm so glad that you decided to focus on this, Ruby, and thank you. Thank you so much. So now we will move on, but Ruby will be joining us later for the question session, so thank you. And so we have three wonderful panelists with us today. And each of the panelists will present a 10-minute presentation, and then of course we'll have the questions afterwards. And so it is now my very great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Jill Butch Karangay. So Butch is a creative entrepreneur, design advocate, and community crusader who is passionate about the possibilities and the talent in his hometown of Cebu in the Philippines. Amongst his numerous roles, he maintains ongoing consultancy contracts with various government agencies and was the private sector lead in attaining Cebu's UNESCO Creative City of Design designation. Butch has in fact recorded his presentation today, but he's actually here in person and will join us for the question session. So without further ado, let's get the recording started.
Hey guys, good day from Cebu in the Philippines. I appreciate you tuning in for the third edition of Connect ASEAN's Creative Futures Dialogue, and would like to thank ASEAN Foundation for the invitation. My real name is Gil, but everyone calls me Butch, and I'm here to talk to you today about creativity and sustainability. I'm here under a few different hats, as I really started off in the private sector, but over the years have worked closely with the Philippine government, the UN, NGOs, and BSOs. I would like to think that this wide range of experiences, extensive network, and cultivated relationships have allowed me to understand the issues and dynamics from both a macro and macro perspective, connect the different stakeholders, and hopefully align resources and initiatives in a more impactful way. Today's talk is divided into three parts. First, to provide background and context, we will be talking about Cebu, its creative sectors, and COVID-19 impact. Next, we will discuss sustainability and creativity concepts and frameworks. Lastly, we will synthesize everything together in the context of our developmental plans. Set in the middle of the 7,000 plus islands that make up the Philippine archipelago is the dynamic and historic city of Cebu, which for over 500 years has been a hub of trade, a center of culture, and a model of resiliency. It has a diverse economy that is centered on tourism, international trade, manufacturing, and tech services. Over the years, it has consistently been ranked amongst the best islands in the world and has been a fixture in many global industry rankings. Cebu has a very vibrant creative sector that is estimated to be worth $500 million, or 7% of Cebu's GDP, and span every subsector as defined by the United Nations Commission on Trade and Development. The city has had quite a few international cultural and design distinctions, the latest being its designation as a UNESCO City of Design in 2019. An export-oriented economy, functional design is the largest subsector in Cebu, accounting for 21% of the total. Creative services is the second largest subsector, accounting for 20.5%. Rounding out the top three, at just over 14%, is visual arts, which is composed of painting, sculpture, and photography. Everything was going great, but then COVID-19 happened, at which point we immediately set out to quantify impacts on the creative community, which turned out to be one of the most affected by the pandemic. As the situation progressed, it became clear that COVID-19 impacted subsectors differently. New media, for example, flourished, while performing arts was severely disadvantaged as they relied heavily on large public gatherings and close human interaction. The value chain, which was severely disrupted at the onset of the pandemic, quickly evolved as new opportunities arose. COVID-19 also amplified pre-existing weaknesses within the creative sectors and accelerated transformational changes that were already well on their way pre-pandemic. An unexpected phenomenon that came out of the lockdowns was that pollution decreased, air quality improved, most developed a greater appreciation for the environment, and forced many to reconsider their past paths, consumption, and behavior. Unfortunately, Mother Nature unleashed yet another calamity in the Philippines last week through Typhoon Vamco, which, while not considered a superstorm, inundated a big part of Luzon Island, causing the worst floods in decades, leaving scores dead or missing, displacing thousands and causing billions in damage. Locally known as Typhoon Ulysses, it once again brought the spotlight on questionable environmental policies, social inequality, good governance, and proper accountability. When we talk about ecological or environmental sustainability, it involves how we use and manage our natural resources, and how we lessen and prevent pollution. However, it is only one of the trifecta that comprise the sustainability framework, which also include economic and social considerations as well as intersectionalities. All in all, sustainability is about how we are able to maintain meaningful development so society as a whole can have better and stabler quality of life that is viable and resilient in the long term. At the heart of sustainability is creativity, which mankind has relied on to survive and flourish from the dawn of civilization. At this point, let us debunk some fake news. A lot of times, creativity is misconstrued to be purely aesthetic, when in fact, it is not just about beauty, artistry, and expression. Creativity is so much more, and therefore, not just essential, but critical in long-term sustainability. One can even argue that creativity can be found everywhere, every day, and in everyone, and that creative thinking can be manifested in a variety of ways depending on one's skill sets and interests. From the divergent, where one approaches something from every possible angle, to the lateral, where out-of-the-box thinking is utilized, to the aesthetic, which is more visual and tactile, to systematic, which is about steps and processes, to the inspirational, which is the innate ability to create without any planning or afterthought. All these 5 types of creative thinking can also exist in the various stages of the creative process. And here we have the 6 E's and traces the type of creativity from when it starts as an idea to when it is elaborated, communicated, transformed into a business, becomes about survival, or evolves to be empowering. All of these types of creative thinking at every level of the creative process will be required as individuals, communities, and the entire planet are faced with a wide range of external and internal threats and challenges that need to be addressed. Creative cities, on the other hand, are those urban centers and melting pots that have the right mix of the 3 T's: talent, technology, and tolerance, or diversity, that utilize creativity as a key strategy for sustainable urban development, and have the individuals, institutions, and systems in place that allow them to magnify impact, accelerate innovation, and provide inspiration not just within their borders, but way beyond them. So now let's move from the theoretical to the practical, utilizing the frameworks of sustainability, creativity, and creative cities in the context of Cebu. One of the key components of our UNESCO bid last year was the creation of the Creative Cebu Grid, which is composed of local and national government, the academe, and the private sector. International collaborators, while not technically part of the grid, are indicated to signify their importance. This grid utilizes a both top-down and bottom-up approach and taps existing institutions, movements, and relationships and harnesses them in a more efficient way that 1. Continuously maps resources and initiatives as well as provide a forum for knowledge exchange. 2. Identify and bridge gaps, both current and projected. 3. Align strategies, initiatives, and goals so that redundancies are reduced and synergies are achieved. We're hoping to fully activate the grid very soon, but have already been utilizing this structure in the last few months. COVID-19 has greatly impacted our timelines, but we continue to trudge on. In the short term, we will continue to drum up excitement and awareness to engender the need for the creative agenda. Second, we intend to expand platforms for more collaboration and innovation. Third is to initiate more proof of concepts that show our plans in action. Lastly, we will endeavor to unleash force multipliers in the medium to longer term. All of these have the goal of institutionalizing creativity, where creativity becomes embedded in policies and processes of every stakeholder, regardless of political regime, and is widely acknowledged as a key driver for our collective sustainable future. Cebu Design Week, which for the first time pivoted to a virtual series of events last month, has been our primary tool for spreading the word and is getting stronger as a platform for knowledge exchange and collaboration. We've also been highlighting companies and individuals who champion sustainability and creativity. By sharing these success stories, we hope to inspire and enable many more to achieve a critical mass of sustainable ideas, products, and services. This year, we began our initial foray into urban acupuncture, where small interventions, when replicated enough, can make a significant impact on the built environment and the cityscape. We started off with small-scale street art, but we will continue to build on those efforts. Next year marks the 500th anniversary of the Magellan-Elcano circumnavigation of the world, in which Cebu plays a significant role. So we hope to scale up the urban acupuncture initiative while helping ease clogged waterways and polluted coastlines. With the Cebu Tourism Commission, of which I am a part of, we will also be developing highland assets and bridging the already intertwined tourism and creative sectors, as well as mountain communities, to properly develop trails, heighten environmental awareness, and introduce sustainable livelihood initiatives. Unfortunately, I've run out of time, but these are just a few examples of how we are merging sustainability and creativity in the Cebu setting. All projects going forward will be anchored in the UN's SDGs, or Agenda 2030. Our ultimate goal is to engage and enable the city's many creative sectors in sustainable community building to achieve a city that excites and a Cebu that delights, that is not only livable, but lovable. This may be the end of today's presentation, but the conversations will continue. I look forward to answering your questions at the open forum later. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me on any of these platforms. Many thanks for your time and attention. Stay safe, stay creative, and stay vigilant. Bye.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Butch. That was a very dense presentation, and there is a lot to unpack from what we've just seen. But fret not, participants. Our webinar today is actually recorded and will be available to view on Facebook and YouTube on the ASEAN Foundation's sites. Also, remember, if you wish to get your certificate for participation, please stay on until the end, and we will send you a short survey and be able to send the presentations to you. We are now on 250 participants at the webinar at the moment, so thank you all for joining us. Remember, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and remember to type in your name and country before putting in your question. So let's go on now to our next speaker, Kay Po Gek Vasi. So Kay is the founder and chief connecting officer of Mesh Minds, a creative technology studio. They specialize in blending the arts with virtual and augmented reality to create impactful, immersive, and engaging experiences for environmentally responsible companies. Their mission is to drive awareness, start conversations, and change the behavior of people towards a sustainable future. Please join me in welcoming to the screen, Kay Vasi.
Hello there. I think I am going to share my screen shortly, but thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be able to address you all today. So let's dive in. I would like to very much tell you all about the work that we've been doing in bringing together art and technology for good. So as Ben very kindly introduced me, I also want to share that, a little bit about my story. So I was born in Brunei and I lived there for the first 10 years of my life. And I must say that growing up in amongst the beautiful nature there has really kind of embedded that really importance in me to really protect our environment. And having since had a couple of kids as well, I just want to make sure that there is a future, a really strong future for all generations to come. And I started off training as a lawyer. It's something I didn't really want to do, but I ended up as a technology lawyer. And that actually gave me all of the kind of grounding in terms of technology and where we were going. And it really kind of inspired me thinking through, well, what is the power of this amazing technology that we all speak of? What can it be used for? Whilst I was doing that, I also realized that there was a lot of X-tech going on. So property technology was suddenly prop tech. But then I suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute, what about the arts? Now, previous to me becoming a tech lawyer, I had also dabbled a little bit at the British Council. So I had been head of arts at the British Council in Singapore. And so I thought to myself, you know what, I really need to look into what is this art and tech possibility? And then really at the end there, thinking through how can we mash together art and technology and then do it for good? So that's how we came up with Mesh Minds. And the name is all around a mesh, which is a network, and minds. So bringing those clever brains together and seeing what we can do. So what I did was come up with the idea that we were going to empower artists, teach them technologies, give them access to hardware that they might not be able to afford or be able to get access to, like the latest iPad or a VR headset, and then actually ask them to work on something related to answering calls to action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is where we are today. So I'm very proud to share with you that we are a creative technology studio that is officially partnered with the UN Environment Programme and the only one in the whole of the Asia Pacific region to have that status. At the same time, I realized that we need to empower more artists. So through the foundation, we also give artists the opportunity to be educated and enabled with the right technologies and to then go on a transformative journey. So that's where we are. So I just jumped a little bit, sorry. Oh, you've got to love again technology as we, there we go. So as I said to you a little bit about our hybrid social enterprise, and there are 4 things that we do, primarily on the foundation side. That's where we see all of the creative technology education programs. So for example, we'll take a bunch of 10 artists at a time, and we'll educate them. We'll teach them all the different things about the workshop so that they can get involved in. There's a lot of things that you can teach yourself nowadays. It's at the end of your fingertips in terms of how fast you can type. And then we also enable them because we really we realize that actually it's not just about joining that workshop. We need to sometimes actually have the hardware in our hands. We also are very careful to make sure that we have good connections between those artists so that they can then transform. And a transformative journey is not just about attending, again, that workshop on your own, but also having the hardware to be able to create something and also that community to help you along your way. Now, on Mesh Mind side of things, that's where we work with lots of different environmentally responsible companies, as well as the United Nations Environment Programme. And that's where we create lots of AR, VR experiences that fall under the Art and Tech for Good umbrella. But overall, we see ourselves as change enablers. We are here for the environment using art and technology. This is a little overview. I know it's tiny on your screen, but I just want them, this is also going to be available to you, so don't worry. You'll have all of our stats, and I'm very, very happy to answer any of your questions about in future or today. We have reached over 2 million people, and I'm very pleased to say that in only 2019, that was the first time that the United Nations Environment Programme had actually done an AR experience. And what they did with us was one of these. So they asked us to create 3 little face filters, and that would be accessible on Instagram and Facebook. And then you would have the call to action. As you can see on the left there, there's a lady who's peering into her smartphone screen, and she's got the pair of bicycle specs on her face. As you peer into that screen, you can then pout your mouth, blow at the screen, and initially a horrible plume of smoke will come out of your mouth, but very quickly, as you continue to blow and make that virtual pledge, that smoke will clear and the bicycle wheels will spin round on your face. So really encouraging people to take public transport. That second one in the middle there is all about switching to a more vegan diet, so moving away from meat and dairy products. And also then on the end, plant trees in your community. So these are interactive filters that you can then use to record a photo or a video of your pledge and then beat air pollution. These are the three key things that they wanted to communicate. So really quickly, easily, in a kind of gamified sense of using augmented reality face filters. And these are the same things as, you know, making yourself into a cat or a dog or a puppy, whatever, a unicorn. I'm sure we've all played around with them on Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat. But these ones are kind of just really quickly trying to tell you about little things that you can do to help the environment. This is our second one in World Environment Day 2020. This during the pandemic. This is just a really simple game that's about the endangered species, 25 of them that we need to save. So with a simple nodding of your head left to right, you then are in 3 different environments and you're able to play the orangutan, the polar bear, or the sea turtle as they avoid the obstacles in their path. So for example, in the sea, as the sea turtle, you are avoiding the ghost nets and the plastic pollution that's there. Okay. This is our most recent one. This is the Sustainable Rice Family. We launched it on Monday. This is all about switching to sustainable rice, which is a new product that's going to be hitting our shelves in 2021. There are face filters. You can make yourself into a little sustainable rice mascot. You can also now spawn that little rice mascot on your rice bowl and get involved and share that message about switching to sustainable rice, which has those 4 key benefits that you see there. Better for health, slowing global warming, saving water, and increasing that farmer income. And it's not genetically modified rice. That many people do think that it is. It's just sustainable farming methods, which actually then lead to these benefits. We do have little videos. We've got all sorts of Instagram tiles that you can check out. Do check out Sustainable Rice platform, and you can follow them on Instagram and see all the wonderful work that we've been doing there. Ooh. Finally, I just wanted to leave you with the key takeaway. The arts and environmental sustainability powered by technology. That's where we are. And one of my nice quotes that I think that really answers the question of why. At its most basic, climate change and environmental protection are amongst the most urgent and all-encompassing issues of our time. We therefore need to understand the particular responsibilities that we have in the arts and to help our sector to understand and address these issues. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kay. And thank you for sharing these wonderful projects that you're working on with us today. And I think that final quote that you've left us with is really, really important. And I think certainly the 3 areas that we were looking at with the Connect ASEAN Creative Futures Dialogue, digital acceleration, social impact, and environmental sustainability, certainly Mesh Minds and your work is really at the forefront of this in the region. So thank you so much for joining us. So, all right, it is now time to move on to our last speaker, Joe Sidek. So Joe is best known as the director of the Georgetown Festival between 2010 to 2018. And Joe is recognized as one of Malaysia's strongest advocates for the arts. Joe directed the 3rd Rainforest Fringe Festival in Kuching, Malaysia, which he founded 4 years ago. Joe is also part of the Industry Advisory Panel of Malaysia's National Cultural Economy Development Agency, or Cendana, and is currently the chairman of the Federation of Asian Cultural Promotion. We are very, very privileged today to be joined by Joe. So please join me in welcoming Joe to the screen.
Thank you, Ben. It's terrifying to speak after the three people before me, you know. Okay, I'm going to go on a human level, a me level, and the power of you as an individual, because I see myself as an individual, as part of a big system, and how important for all of us to take a role in what we do and be responsible for what we do in our action. When I started doing the festival, I always asked, what was my duty with the festival? What was the impact that I wanted to leave behind? And I want to share two case studies that I did, personally with the places that I worked in. And the questions I asked myself is, who was the festival for whom? And then this last 6 months where there was no work, I had to rethink and reimagine what was important to me and what was important to everything around me. And questions like humanity, environment, rationale, meaning, and happiness became very important for me in the last 6 months to rethink. Next slide, please. As you mentioned, I worked on a festival. Next slide, please. I worked in a festival called Georgetown Festival. It's a UNESCO site. It got its site 2008. And important, it was part of the Straits of Malacca, Penang, and Georgetown and Malacca. And we were focusing on outstanding universal values of living and built spaces. People, communities were the most important thing and what they wanted. So Penang, Georgetown, it's a very small space. It was, I think we had, they worked out a plan. It was 109 hectares of land area, which was the heritage core zone, and 150 hectares for the buffer zone. So the Penang wasn't ready for this UNESCO listing. So the state quickly put together Georgetown World Heritage Incorporated to look into management, and then rushed an idea of a greening Penang thing. And I think this year they launched something called Tourism Plan 2030. So we're still grasping, so I would love for Butch for us to continue our Creative Cities Southeast Asia to talk and help Penang, because I think what happens in Malaysia is we don't build blueprint plans. We rush, we do things, we enjoy ticking in boxes, but there is no long-term plan. And as an individual, I kept always pushing for this idea of having strategy and plan, because Penang, places, people, for me, people were very important. The preservation, protection, and rejuvenation was very important. Next slide, please. So I did a festival for 9 years. It was about branding, and my KPI was, okay, you have a festival. Next slide, please. Bring attention, bring numbers, bring people, make sure that you get accolades, and that is my process. But what was good was the chief minister who was in charge gave me total freedom. So here we have the whole world gave us attention. We had everyone looking at us, and everyone said, "Oh wow!" So in that 9 years, the tourism figures just went up. The festival itself had about 250,000 people that came for the festival. Next slide, please. This one picture that I want to share had such an amazing effect that 10 million people on the last count trigger happy, took pictures, but they also littered the place. They caused traffic jams, stalls opening up, and an entire area became so gentrified that people had to move out. Between that and the next slide, between that and the rent control repeal that we had about 10 years ago, the whole landscape of Georgetown changed. It became really, really gentrified. The developers came in, a lot of money was coming in, and so we had to find a happy balance between government, private, and public. I found myself caught in between all three. I worked for the government, I belonged to a private sector, and my heart was all for the public. So it was very difficult because there was also the imbalance between federal and local government wants and will. Next slide, please. So Penang changed. This is the landscape of Penang. Old buildings became gentrified cafes and galleries and all that, and the residents were displaced. But it had also got good energy. It brought in new businesses. It brought in work, creative hubs started popping up. But one thing that I wanted to do was to build green lungs. So we used a lot of the old corridors, laneways, to build green lungs into the inner city. We worked in pocket areas of parks and all that. And I kept telling the state, next slide please, I kept telling the state the most important thing was to control tourism. But you know, when governments, next slide please, when government wants to push tourism, they don't care. They want numbers, numbers, numbers. So this is a picture of Venice that you really don't want to go. This is Boracay that had to close down because it was overpopulated. So it was very difficult. So I'm still at a battle now with the state for them to understand that they have to have a tourism management plan. Next, I switched my attention to East Malaysia, which is the size of Peninsular Malaysia. Next slide, please. And here I found fascinating stories, narratives of indigenous history, nature, tradition, local stories. And the major issue there was deforestation. But people didn't care, people didn't know. So my idea was to actually share stories with the locals about what they had and to value what they had, to look at the stories that they have that they can share to the world. Next slide, please. So this is, to me, what was fascinating, because Borneo has 500 indigenous languages, you know, and yet the people didn't know. And we have people like Alfred Wallace, who was a compatriot of Charles Darwin, who did a lot of research in Sarawak. But a lot of the people in Sarawak didn't know it, and they didn't understand what they had, the richness of history that they had there, the richness of natural. So we did projects. I mean, for me, it was still a study. I'm still studying it. It was studying working with local materials like bamboo. We inspired artists and architects to try to work with local materials. We had a lot of programming on forest food to teach the nutrients of what we had from the jungle. And I really learned a lot from the indigenous groups in Sarawak. I felt that the indigenous people knew how to respect land. They never took more than what they need to use. So I became fascinated with Sarawak and the history and nature. Next slide, please. So the people in Sarawak didn't really know because they felt shut out from the whole world. Next slide. What was amazing was their history, and before, go back to the last slide, please. They had artists, they had artisans that didn't have global markets. They had fabulous fabrics and rituals and textiles, and they were already working on natural dyes. But when we compare ourselves to Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand, we were not marketing it globally. So I started working on projects with the local artisans and local textile weavers and using natural dyes. We started using music, traditional music, and we coupled it with indigenous groups from Australia and New Zealand. For me, it is still a studying journey of trying to find how to make local people value what they have before it's all gone. You know, and to me, that's the real sustainability and ecology of a place. How locals need to value what they have before it's all gone. Whether it's the forest, whether it's traditional trades, whether it is traditional music, it's not valued very much now. But they're really, really proud of it. I remember doing a video. I called it Sarawak by Pride. It had 600 over 1,000 views because they were very proud of it. But somehow or rather, there was a disconnect between what the government wanted and what the local people can deliver. And so, before I finish, I wanted just to share with something I learned very recently in one of my talks in Africa about how Bhutan 20 years ago started to relook at how do you measure success of what you do, whether it's money, and they came up with this gross national happiness. So for me, it's all about balance, humanity, and how you as an individual can play a very strong role in helping, whether it's government, other people, or private enterprise or public businesses, because you're an individual, and with for me, I worked as an individual, and your voice is as strong as anyone else out there. So I think I finished my 10 minutes. Thank you very much. But thank you, Ben, and thank you, ASEAN Foundation.
Thank you so much, Joe, and for leaving us with these two really strong points on environmental sustainability, and that is to look after our built environment, but also our natural environment, indigenous cultures. I think taking those 2 points into consideration is a really a wonderful way to end that presentation. So thank you, Joe. Now, before we go on to question time, we have actually arranged a little treat for everyone. It is an animated summary of our presentations. This has been prepared by Mr. Aga Nugraha Muharam from Mudi Baja. So please enjoy the animation. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mas Aga, for your creative contribution to the webinar. I'm so sad that this is our last webinar for the year. I think we need to make more webinars so we can have more animations. Now it's time for us to go into question time. So let's start with our first question. It is from Anastasia Santi Kachiti from Indonesia. And okay, her question is, since the pandemic occurred, many of us were not able to leave our homes. We focused on activities such as watching TV and listening to music. I think some of this was actually raised in Butcher's presentation, in that during the pandemic, the environment, people learned to appreciate their environment a lot more. So by being locked down, this actually reduced our impact on the environment. So the question from Anastasia to our panelists is this the best way for us to live for a more sustainable future? We will go in the order of how our presenters and keynote speaker presented this evening. So we'll start with Ruby with her response.
Hi, thank you. Excellent question. I think that everyone is thinking about how to be better about sustainability, and so I would expand beyond that into perhaps single-use plastics or something that's relatively simple to use or not use, so that you're dealing with the plastic problem as well. But I defer to everybody else who is really in the field. So,
thank you, Ruby. Over to you, Butch.
Yeah, I thank you, Anastasia, for the question, and to Ben. Ruby, I completely agree. Even though the environment did benefit from the decrease in emissions, which resulted in better air quality, you had cleaner beaches and you had lower noise pollution, but it was mitigated by the increased waste generated from all the discarded PPEs and all the takeout and deliveries from your favorite food outlets and Lazada. Also, as I mentioned in my vid, a more sustainable future also takes into account economic and social factors. So it's not really just about the environment. And unfortunately, society is not yet at a point that everyone can work from home. In fact, the more marginalized segments of society need to work in person, which increases the digital divide even more. Like with most things, sustainability is really about balance and finding the right mix that makes sense and works for you. I do think that one of the most positive things that have come out of this pandemic is that we've all become much more appreciative of nature, more mindful of our actions, and have realized that we can't be happy with less quantity and more quality, and that quality is a very personal thing. Like Joe said earlier, he's learned to appreciate all these other facets that one would not have appreciated without the lockdowns. Whether or not this will be sustained post-pandemic still remains to be seen, but we can be hopeful.
Thank you, Butch. Over to you, Kay.
I think it gave us a really good chance to reset, and in a way we're able then to kind of contrast and compare, perhaps. I don't think that we're going to be able to lock up human beings from seeing each other forever. We shouldn't all be thinking about a future just staying at home. But at the same time, where we've seen clear skies return in Beijing, where we've seen large numbers of otters come back to be in Singapore, perhaps these are then indicators that actually, less human activity being around on the streets and perhaps, can actually lead to a regeneration of nature and clear skies. So perhaps that will hopefully help us to notice again when the otters have left again and the grey skies come back. Perhaps we should also then be looking to reset again.
Thank you, Kay. Joe, would you like to weigh in?
I so agree with all three that reset is the thing and new habits. But I want to share something really. The digital online carbon footprint makes 3.7% of the global greenhouse emission, which is equivalent to the airline industry. So it's staying in front of your computers, tapping all day, doesn't mean that you're reducing greenhouse effect. So I think we really need to find a good balance, not rather than just thinking that, oh, let's just gravitate to online and we're turning the world green. We're not. It's the same carbon emission as the airline industry.
Thank you, Joe. A very good point. All right, let's go on to our next question from Fibia Diastuti from Indonesia. So her question is in two parts. What cooperation initiatives have you seen develop in Asia for the arts sector during the pandemic? And what tangible benefits do you expect for the creative economy? And let's start with Ruby again.
Yeah, I think that, at the Asian Cultural Council, for example, where we provide multiple grants annually to artists, usually between the United States and Asia, we've seen a lot more intra-Asia collaborations during the pandemic. And so we are finding, for example, collaborations between Chinese and Japanese and Korean artists, Indonesian artists. So I think that this is a time when deeper connectivity is going to be an important key factor and in the arts. And I think that together there will be more you know, in post-COVID, I think there'll be more exhibitions that are collaborative in the region that's intra-Asia. So as I mentioned, the geopolitical shift, I think this is also happening in the arts as well.
Thank you, Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with Ruby. I think we're in an era of hyper collaboration that is being powered by Zoom and other platforms such as this webinar. So the amount of knowledge sharing in the form of good practices, success, and failure stories, because I think failure stories are equally as important as success stories, and creative interventions are at an all-time high. It's been estimated that digital adoption has leapfrogged 5 years of growth in just a matter of months. So it's quite staggering. I also want to point out something that Ruby mentioned earlier in her keynote, that it's really about people, and COVID has enabled interactions with people from all over the planet in various creative disciplines that would never have talked to each other before. And maybe now that we are, and everyone's so open to it, we can weave the magic carpets that I love listening about. I haven't seen any studies yet on how they translated into concrete projects in the global setting, but I have no doubt that the impacts have been substantial. From our perspective alone, we have been taking all the learnings from all the webinars, virtual conferences, and other fora to enhance our planning and programming that we hope will have real life impact in the very short term, and long-term implications, not just for our creative economy, but for the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Butch. Over to you, Kay.
Yeah, so we jumped on the bandwagon with bringing Artivive to Southeast Asia for the first time. And whereas previously the co-founder of Artivive, a lovely man called Sergio, had really preferred to do things in person. So he would have flown to the different destinations and given that workshop about AR art in person. He actually said, oh, well, I've actually done it once before. Maybe I can bring it to Singapore. So that was the first ever time that the Singapore crowd had the chance to learn right from the master how to make their art come to life with a really simple drag and drop interface. So we were then able to help 20 different artists create new posters, all under the theme Sustainable Singapore. And then that has been shared with the world. So we would very much like to see more of these remote workshops, creations of these international collaborations, and then global showcasing with the world in these important messages. And I think there's a real good opportunity to do more of that now.
Thanks, Kay. Over to you, Joe.
For me personally, it's been a really good 6-7 months where, because of the COVID and all that, I feel very strongly about Asian having our own narrative and to not have a Western benchmark. So through FACP, through your Connect ASEAN, to Mekong Cultural Hub, we're trying to connect Asian jigsaw pieces all over, especially West Asia, South Asia, which never comes into the narrative of Asia. So for me personally, I find it the challenge is, why don't we have a very strong Asian narrative? The time is now for Asia, to have our own stories, our own narratives, and our own benchmark. And I don't know why I personally didn't do it before, but this is where I put myself now, an Asian narrative.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, on to our next question. So this one is from Agung Kurniawan from Indonesia. And his question is, as an artist or creative, why is it important to consider environmental impact? And we'll start with Ruby.
Well, I think it's important because creative people can do so much more. So it's an opportunity really to look at sustainability and think in ways that most people cannot. You all have this incredible imagination. So how can you inform your work more with the sort of ideas of sustainability and so on through the work that you do? It's critical.
Yeah. Should I just go back? Yeah. I think, it doesn't matter whether you're an artist or a creative. I think every human being, no matter what profession, should be considered about environmental impact, because society as a whole has been living unsustainably for such a long time. And at the rate we're going, Many natural resources will be exhausted in a few decades. But as artists and creatives, as we mentioned, we do have unique skill sets that can help raise awareness, encourage others to act, and propose solutions to the many challenges that face the planet. So I feel it is even incumbent upon us, because we have the skill sets, to acknowledge our potential as creative problem solvers and really assert our roles in helping craft a better future for us, each other, and the planet.
Thanks, Butch. Kay?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, from our perspective at Mesh Finds, the reason why we want to work with artists is that we really feel that they're some of the best communicators on the planet. I, as part of my job, obviously have to read a lot of UN environment and science reports, and previously as a lawyer, I had to read things that are really, really long. People have historically loved to write very long reports with very long sentences and very long words, almost as if to confuse. So I find that working with artists, they're really some of the best placed people on the planet to be able to distill something that is otherwise potentially quite a somber message, which is very important, but they can, through their art, whatever medium that is, and not just visual arts at all, they can communicate those messages really simply, making it accessible to all. And that's why artists have a special role to play in driving forward environmental sustainability messaging.
Thank you, Kay. Over to you, Joe.
Well, all three have said the thing. It's whether you're a president or an artist, it's all our duty to save the world, to save the earth. But I agree with Butch and not all three of you that we have skills. We have conscience. We have better skills to think out of the box, and we relate to people better than politicians or presidents or business people. I think because we feel
We're also less threatening, probably.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think, okay, here we have another question that's come from our audience. This is from Rani Pramesti from Indonesia. And this is a good one. So what are some of the ethical challenges you've experienced when working across the private, public, and creative sectors? So that's the first part of the question. And how did you navigate decisions, or have you had to navigate decisions in these kind of tricky situations? For instance, funding for the arts from cigarette companies, which happens in Indonesia, of course. So over to you, Ruby.
I can only talk about some of the issues that I encountered in public health. So, you know, some of the dichotomies in terms of we need to get the medicines out, but some officials or counties, provincial officials are not assisting with that sort of logistics and so on. So I think that, you know, those are some of the issues that I found with the Clinton Foundation work in implementing care and treatment for HIV and AIDS. And so this was all over China, Asia, Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea. That was my territory. And so it was very difficult. It's people who are doing really good work, but sometimes they cannot help the system. So one cannot be judgmental. We're not the corruption police. We're not police in any way. We're just trying to help governments access medicines and so on. And I think it's true also for the arts. You know, any funding that comes through public arenas, sometimes it gets, it's difficult in terms of the logistics of the supply, whether it's funds or medicine.
Great. From our perspective, we've seen quite a lot of intellectual property infringement, and people complaining that, you know, that one copy that, you know. But one problem that we actually, one finding actually from all our recent work mapping out industry is that most artists and creative entrepreneurs and creative industry practitioners are freelancers and hold multiple job holding are in the informal sector of the economy. So they are not protected under IP rights and not able to access any government aid or any other government services. So one of our policy recommendations really with our Department of Trade and Industry is to how do we incent migration into the formal sectors of the economy when it is still perceived by a lot of people in the arts and culture sector to be disadvantageous to them to be a formal company because they are subject to more scrutiny, more taxes, etc., etc. So we're hoping to address this situation very soon, and we've actually been discussing with various levels of government to change it.
Thank you, Butch. Over to you, Kay.
One of the things that we found tough actually is sometimes trying to convince governments actually to part with some funding as well, because obviously all of our programs need to be funded. We certainly don't want to ask artists to work for free. And sometimes there is a little bit of a pushback in terms of like, ooh, a bit too much focus on environmental means that it's going to be a bit political. And I do really want to take the environmental agenda in senses of what we're trying to do in terms of raising awareness in a kind of fun and engaging and educational way, take it away from that political agenda, put it onto the social agenda and say, isn't this a good thing that we are focusing on teaching our youth and communities online how to make environmental pledges that they care about? So there is that kind of, the funding dichotomy, how we know that what we want to do is kind of worthwhile, but convincing people to kind of come on board and throw some money in the ring as well to help fund the program is always a problem. As well, in relation to your cigarette company, yes, we are approached. We were approached by Shell, for example. Oh, can you help us with this new campaign? And we always just go and check with the people that we work with at the UN and just say, is this a type of greenwashing scenario where this company is kind of pretend that they have a green agenda, but actually are really, really not? And so we always use them as a kind of barometer, dipping stick to make sure that we're working on the right kinds of projects.
Thank you, Kay. Over to you, Joe.
My problem is always serving a master or government or companies, and whether they're really sincere about their wishes. And it's always about numbers and figures. And greed, power, and ego is something that I have to battle with when you deal with people like that. I always say that I can sell my body, but I won't sell my soul. When I have to deal with a situation like that. And I always feel that we have to be really good gatekeepers to negotiate a balance between the lords and the masters and the gods, and then who we really care for are the people. So I'm just practicing being a good gatekeeper.
Thank you, Joe. All right, I think we've almost wrapped up our question time, but seeing as though this is our last webinar and we have 250 plus young people from across ASEAN joining us today, perhaps I'll just go and just ask each of you if you just have a parting word for everyone today. Something that you'd like to leave them with as we close the Connect ASEAN Creative Futures Dialogue. And Ruby, let's start with you.
I would say to all of you, do more than you think you can. The future is yours. The planet is yours.
Thank you, Ruby. Butch?
Yeah. This what else to say? It's been a tough year, but yeah, I hope that we take our learnings from this year and really work hard to fight for a better future for us, each other, and the planet.
Thank you, Butch. Kay?
We will continue to educate, enable, and transform artists so that they can work on projects that are art and tech for good. So please get involved and get in touch.
And Joe?
be and stay positive. In time, this too shall pass. We think, we imagine, we work, and resurgam, which means you'll be coming back.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers today for joining us, and a very special thank you to the Republic of Korea and the ASEAN Republic of Korea Cooperation Fund for supporting the Connect ASEAN Creative Futures Dialogue. And now from our Executive Director, Dr. Yang Mi Eng, and the rest of us at the ASEAN Foundation, thank you for joining us on this magic carpet ride and giving us your time today. This concludes our webinar, and I will now pass the screen back to Stella.
Thank you, panelists, for your insights. Thank you, Ben, for moderating the session. I would also like to thank our attendees in Zoom and Facebook for your engagement in this webinar. If, like me, you want to watch and replay this webinar again, do not worry, since we'll be uploading both the full version and the summary in form of graphic recording soon. Finally, we have come to the end of the webinar. This is also our last webinar of 2020. However, we still have more exciting activities next year, and we hope that you can join us again. And for the moment you've been waiting for, how to get your certificate. The survey link has been distributed by the organizer in the live chat, and you just have to fill it completely, and the organizers will send the certificate to your email within a month. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and look forward to Connect ASEAN's future activities.